Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now, in today's episode, we're going to continue on with the interior of the main station building. That's some of the internal walls, plus also some of the permanent fixtures, so some of the permanent furniture fixtures that need to be added, particularly into the ticket office. So where we left off in the previous episode there, of course, was the interior decor to the interior outer walls. So in today's episode, we're looking at the interior internal walls, which are yet to be installed. And of course, there is the decor finish to those, plus also a little bit of a focus on the ticket office and some of the, I guess you would say, permanent or fixed in furniture components, so where the counters are for the ticket window and also the parcels office window, plus also some pigeonhole style shelving to go on the walls. Before we get into that, I just thought I'd like to do a little bit of an update on the layout in general, sort of where things are at, and I guess in some ways a little bit of a explanation as to the slow progress, what I feel like is slow progress in terms of modelling on the actual layout itself, because basically I haven't done anything on the layout. I've been so focused on the station redevelopment, the longer platforms, these new station buildings, and then of course also getting into modelling the station for Laura and Gill. So the layout hasn't really seen any major modelling progress in probably well over a year, and I think really the last area that I was focusing on, of course, was the disused viaduct that runs across the landscape, and of course the addition of some further tracks into the depot area as well. So I've taken some video footage as it stands at the moment for the entire layout, and as you can see, there's pretty much work in progress in every single area, and I really do want to sort of get back into that, and I think it'll be good for the channel as well, because I think with at least a year working on the station redevelopment, I kind of feel like the channel tends to sort of be, well, at least the subject matter is being focused on that and not really focused on other areas. Now, one of the reasons I've sort of not had an opportunity to do more work on the layout is just simply things that have been going on in the background. Now, around this time last year, I decided to wind up my graphic design business, which I ran as a solo operation, and that I did for years. And so with that came the beauty of knocking off early, of when there wasn't a heavy workload, take the day off and things like that. And of course I worked on the layout, so I think during that time, through those years, I sort of had more flexibility. I was able to work on the layout. Now, the reason I sort of felt that I wanted to sort of wind up the business is because as I'm getting a bit older, I sort of didn't want to be messing around with running a business and having to do all the company tax and GST and all that kind of nonsense that's involved, particularly here in New Zealand anyway. So I thought getting back into paid employment, so actually being employed working for another company, would be wise at this point for the remainder of my working career. So I managed to get a job with a business in Christchurch as an in-house graphic designer, and that was actually, it wasn't a full-time role. It actually was it was about 30 hours a week, and it actually worked out perfectly. So I could still spend time working on the layout and spending time on models and actually doing other parts of the modelling process on the Station Road layout. And of course, unfortunately, around April this year, I was actually made redundant from that role, along with 3 other staff members. The company that I was working for was in a bit of financial strife, I think, and they simply just couldn't pay us. So that job disappeared, and then for quite a period of time I had not a lot to do apart from job hunting, and so I was able to put a lot more time into the modelling of the station, but also actually spend more time doing stuff around the house. Now, just recently, in the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've managed to secure new employment, and that is full-time. So it does mean that my time that I can spend on the model railway and on the station build is much more restricted, and I have now really basically only the weekends to work on the layout, to work on this station build. So that really has slowed things up a bit. But the aim is, and this is what I sort of really hope I'll do, is once I've got this particular the station build completed for my version for the station on the Station Road layout, I will then switch over to Laura and Gill's station build, but I'm not going to do an entire video series on that particular version of their station. I'll do updates here and there, but I'm certainly not going to go into the detail that I've gone into developing this station for the Station Road layout, because you've seen it all before, you don't need to see it again. So I'm hoping to switch over some of the topics for the channel to some modelling actually on the Station Road layout. So hopefully that will sort of get back into the swing of some more variety in terms of channel content. So that's where we're at with the Station Road layout and what's been happening with the layout over the last year and a bit, which is basically nothing, and what I hope to do in the coming months and over the next year. So let's just jump back to the topic of this episode, of course, which is looking at the additional interior detailing for the main station building. So I think without further ado, let's just jump into it. So I'm just assembling these fireplaces for the main station building. So in this station there's 4 in total, so I guess I should say fireplace surrounds. So I'm just making them all the same. I'm guessing they probably would have been the same, but this really is the final parts of preparation before we can actually start to insert the interior walls, so the inner interior walls. And I've been busy making up and designing an interior for the ticket office. So I would have naturally assumed there would be some form of counters, cupboards, drawers, pigeonholes, and all of that kind of stuff that you would find potentially in a ticket office. So I've been preparing the design for that, and I sort of weighed up between 3D printing all the components or laser cutting them, and what I've actually gone down the route of both. So some parts are laser cut and some are 3D printed. So the pigeonholes are 3D printed, but the main counter and sort of desk unit is laser cut, and the base of that is the laser cut from 1.25mm case board, and then the top of the counter is 0.55mm black card. And it's really a case of working out what is the best way to assemble it. So I felt that assembling the entire counter unit and so forth, and then sandwiching the walls, or having it sandwiched either side with the 2 walls, and it's a case of making it once again sort of partially assemble components that all then come together at the end. So once I'd assembled the base structure for the ticket office counter and desk unit, basically sprayed the entire thing in a sort of a dark brown colour, and then once that was dry, then I wrapped around the lower components with a printed texture of drawers and cupboards that wrapped around, basically just to give a bit of an indication that there's drawers and cupboards and so forth underneath the counter. So the pigeonhole components were 3D printed, and they were relatively easy to design up on the computer, essentially just a grid pattern that's then extruded to create that effect. So that's our fireplace surrounds, and they look reasonably convincing. So I'll apply the rest of these and get all this ready, and then we can take a look at actually how this is all going to go together. Right, so I've anchored this countertop actually into place because I felt that if I put the walls in and try to get this countertop in here, it's going to be quite difficult because the upper layer of this counter has actually got the protruding sections that actually pass through the wee hatches of the windows. So the ticket window, the countertop actually comes through so that you have this sort of seamless top to the counter there, and then also actually here for the parcels window. So this has been anchored into place now, and the idea is we can then insert, now that we've got our fire surrounds on this wall here, we can slot this wall into place, and that can be glued in, and you can start to see how that's working on there. And if I turn it around, so essentially this wall here is going to butt up to this side of the counter, and it will sort of help to get it vertical and perpendicular as well, because the plan is, and I think it's because it's one aspect I want to avoid, is I may just glue the base of the walls and not the sides, because I'm just worried about glue getting smeared everywhere. And then for this wall here, which of course is actually for where the parcels offices and the parcels window, this has got to be slotted in on an angle, and then it's brought up to where the counter is, and we've got to actually work it in to that counter slot. So you can now see where that window is in the parcels office, and then it passes through to the other side where the counter is. So that's that sorted out for there. Now, as I mentioned in the previous episode, another aspect that also needs to be included before all of these walls can be anchored in, of course, is our doors. So I've prepared all the doors now, and it's very much the same as the doors that were done on the Platform 2 building. So I'll pop a link in the top corner of how these doors were made. So I think what I'm going to do with these doors now, there's 5 that are all the same width, and then 2 that are narrow. The narrow ones are actually where the toilet cubicles are. So I may glue some of them closed, in the closed position, and I may glue some that are open as well. So it's just deciding which way around I want to do this. So I'll sort this out off camera and then come back when the doors are all in place. So I've anchored the first wall in, and it's the wall between the ticket office and the station master's office, and I've glued that door as open. So I'm kind of thinking maybe that the station master might sort of go between that and the ticket office quite a bit, possibly, and sort of felt like maybe his door might be just kind of left open. So that's been anchored in place. I have just put a little smidgen of glue at the very top, which has avoided it from smearing glue everywhere, and it's now anchored to the base. So what we're going to do now is add in some of these cubby holes. So these are the 3D printed cubby holes, and they've been spray painted in a brown colour, and one of them is actually going on this wall on this side, and what it'll hopefully do is assist with gluing it in place. Now, it's probably a little bit difficult for me to film this because we're in such a pokey, tiny little space that trying to get the camera in here with my hands and all these components at the same time is a little bit difficult. So I'll just pop this in here, and then we can, of course, take a close look. I'll get the camera off its mount, and we can actually see how it's looking close up. So I've now installed the 3D printed cubby holes, or I should say pigeon holes really, and there was another set in the opposite corner that sort of went around the corner, and of course I wasn't too careful in that sense. There's a bit of a splodge of glue there, and there's some remnants of other glue, but I think I should be able to fix that. I may get a cotton bud, I might be able to get some of that off, and also I may actually just go over this entire area with the AK matte varnish. It makes everything very, very matte. So you'll see also I put in the other wall, the remaining wall, and that's between the ticket office and the parcels area, or parcels office as well, and that's been installed into place, plus also a door that of course goes from the parcels office out into the main booking hall or waiting area. So I certainly think it's coming together now. Of course, there's still a lot of things to add in here. Of course, there'll be a clock on the wall. There'll possibly be like a map of the railway line, or partial railway line as well around the station area. And then I think I've really got to do some kind of ticket dispensing rack or something. I'm guessing they would have had some kind of rack on the wall that would have had various tickets, printed paper tickets that are plucked off or so forth and issued to, of course, travellers. So there's still quite a few things to add in. On top of that as well, we've got to look at the station master's office, and there would have been a desk in there. Of course, there's chairs as well. Now, I am actually going to look at how I might be able to do some 3D printed chairs, or I may go down the route of laser cutting some chairs. I'm not quite sure which way to go with that. So that's this section of the main sort of, I guess, built-in components that have been added, and of course the doors. And then I'd gone ahead also and added in the internal walls, and of course the fireplace surrounds into the other end of the station as well. So we've now got our bathroom area and so forth. So this was done in a very similar method to the other end of the station, where I pre-assembled the internal wall components before slotting the entire assembled component into the interior station area. And of course, prior to doing that, it was a case of adding the doors into place. So some I've made the doors closed, and some of the doors are left open or ajar. So once again, in these particular rooms is going to be furniture added. Of course, we've got the porter's office. There'll be a desk in there, there'll be chairs and any other potential furniture items to go in there. Of course, we've got the ladies' waiting room. That's going to have some seating in there, and of course clocks on the wall, timetables, route maps, things like that. And then of course a few more 3D printed toilets to go into the bathrooms, and a men's urinal. Now the urinal I did on the Platform 2 building, that was laser cut and assembled, whereas this time around I'll do a 3D printed set of urinals. And then of course there's also hand basins and so forth. So it's starting to take shape in terms of the interior, and we can just actually pop this all together and see how it's going to look. Now, which way around this is going to go? That goes that way around. So we'll just slot the booking hall into the middle here, and this is now starting to look more like the interior of a station. And of course there's lots to do in here as well. There's clocks to go on walls, we've got bench seating to add in, so that it's still numerous interior items to be added. So I can now tick off the interior walls for the main station building, and I think in the next episode what we'll get into is we'll be covering a little bit more of the detail with the interior, as I mentioned, things like clocks, route maps, timetables, all that kind of stuff that go on the walls, and then of course the additional interior furniture and things like desk, chairs, bench seating, all of that kind of stuff. So hopefully after that then we can actually step into the electrics, because they need to be fed in, and then we can actually get onto the roof structure, and then we will be looking very close to completing the main station building. And then of course after that then we can actually get into the actual station area, so completing the station platforms and what's going to actually happen around the station in those areas where the street runs by and things like that. Now, some time back I asked Laura and Gil to measure up the platform edge and so forth that they managed to unearth in their backyard where the pond is, and they did a really excellent job of measuring that. They actually did a short little video which was very entertaining, and they were extremely thorough. It was very good. So with all of those details, and this might be probably a month out yet before I get to the station platform, as I'll be taking the measurements they've done, and we can actually then start to look at creating the platforms, the stonework and so forth that runs down the sides, and of course the platform edging. So hopefully we'll be able to get into that, as I said, maybe in about a month's time. So I'll leave it there for today's episode. I certainly hope you've gained some insights and inspiration into your own railway modelling. Do take care, look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.